All right, I think we're live. Oop, hold it. It'd help if I brought the mic a little closer. Would it not? Boy, I'm doing good today. It has been a crazy couple of days. First of all, can everyone hear me? Everyone see me okay? Let's see here. All right, and we have a lot of questions already. So, let's see here. This winter has been weird. And we are entering the most difficult part of the winter, which is late February through March, where the weather pattern gets extremely volatile. You're getting elements of spring. You're getting elements of winter. You're getting a lot of mixed variety of weather impacts. And, of course, yesterday we had a tornado. Yeah, a tornado actually verified in Middlesex County, I believe, and it moved towards Monmouth County, very close, but it collapsed before getting there. Actually, it approached here, and what caused that feature to develop was very interesting because you had just enough instability in the atmosphere to support the thunderstorm, and then you had a lot of strong low-level vertical wind shear, and that low-level vertical wind shear is what supported just enough rotation to produce a tornado. And very surprising, I have to admit. I was very surprised. I like the idea of convection, and I mentioned that in the video yesterday morning, the idea of thunder showers and maybe some rumble of thunder. But if you said, hey, look, there's going to be a tornado, I would have been said, okay, you got to stop watching Hollywood, and that would be very much unlikely. But here we are talking about a tornado. So very unusual weather pattern, to say the least, and it's going to continue. And there's a lot in this pattern that is very interesting to me. I put out the severe threat analysis, which we'll cover. I know I see a couple of questions there. The long-range thoughts, we'll go over that, and what's to expect all the way through early March. And I'm not sure how to start this discussion with in terms of the weather pattern overall, because on one hand, I don't want to underplay the potential for winter storm development. On the other hand, I see a lot of problems with trying to support a winter storm. So on one hand, we have, let's just take a look at the 500 millibar pattern here. Okay, so there's our radar. Okay, so you take a look at the operational, you could use the European guidance, and I'm not looking at individual storms just yet, but just look at the 500 millibar pattern. And you look at this and you're like, hey, this could get pretty interesting. You got some blocking setting up here. You have the same thing on the GFS. But notice in both the operational GFS and European guidance, you're seeing a rising of the polar jet stream. And you're seeing that in the ensemble guidance as well. Very interesting evolution here. So what's happening here? Well, if I was looking at this in December and January, I would be ringing the alarm bells. Like, hey, this looks like it could be a real significant potential. But then, and I talked about this in the long-range thoughts that I just put out, I look at these temperature anomalies. And in fact, let's do daily. Let's do daily. Because I know someone's going to say, well, that's not daily, so let's do daily. Let's see what that looks like. And you'll see very interesting data. Now, what do I see when I look at this as a meteorologist? I see a lot of volatility. I see wild swings, but those swings in temperatures get progressively warmer. I see that the core of our air masses are focused in the Rockies, which would make sense with this type of pattern with a negative PNA. If this was January and February, or say early January, mid-February, I would say, okay, the polar air masses are going to be strong, they're going to be focused in the west, and they're going to bleed eastward, and we'll have to watch the storm track for isotropic lifting events and significant snow and ice events. And then I would go on to discussing the idea of these storm tracks producing initial snow coverage and a snowpack that will help to enhance each polar air mass thereafter and allow for that cold air mass to build further and further south. And then the block that's in place over portions of northern Canada and Greenland will suppress the storm track. And almost all of that would be true now, except for a couple of factors. And it explains why, even in this pattern, you're seeing this signal. And it's because of where we've been most of the winter. Where we've been most of the winter is, well, I mean, if we get an inch of snow out of this pattern, there would actually be more snow than what we've seen all winter in some locations. So that tells you everything you need to know. There's no snowpack. And the one that does exist in New England is below normal. So you don't have any way to insulate the polar or Arctic air masses that you're seeing in the model guidance. And so what we've been seeing over the last several days, and in fact here, let me see if I can, let's go to New York City, right? Actually, you know what, let's go a little bit further inland from New York City, because let's say that we have, let's say Trenton. Let's go to Trenton. And let's see if I can find 10-day temperature trends. Okay. So here's my concern when we look at the forecast, is that as we look at the forecast for days 7 through 10 here, is that they constantly are ending up colder than reality. That they are trying to produce a colder forecast than what's really going to happen. And let me see if I can show another trend here. You kind of see that evolution really nicely here. So what does that mean? What is that trying to tell us? Well, I think what's happening is that the model guidance, whether it's the GFS, European guidance, what have you, is saying, okay, initially, here comes this polar air mass, and it has 850 millibar temperatures that are pretty impressive, right? So let's go to this time period, right? Perfect, right? So it takes that initial forecast and it says, okay, this should support these type of temperatures this time of year. Should be in the 30s. Here comes the snow. Here comes the storm. That enhances the storm. Boom, boom, boom. But once we get under 5 days, which is why I've been putting 120 hours as my measuring stick for whether or not we're actually dealing with a significant snowfall or not for the region, is that it picks up the actual environment in place, and those polar air masses end up much warmer and their duration gets cut. So instead of, let's say, 3 or 4 days of cold weather, you end up with 1. And so when I see solutions like this, I don't rule it out. In fact, in the forecast for Tuesday, I do have wintry mix as a threat. But I'm not so gung-ho about it. And when I say wintry mix, I would not be surprised a lot of this changes over to rain. because I don't have confidence in the polar air masses being as cold as what's being forecasted. In terms of the pattern overall, very stormy. Very stormy, very active. March is coming in like a very, very annoyed, pissed off lion. And it's going to be very stormy. Now, does this mean no snow? Or there's no way we can get a winter storm? No. If you get the short waves to interact just right, and let me pull up 500 millibars, right? Here's the problem I have here. You see this pattern right here at 120 hours? Look at this interaction with the polar jet stream and the subtropical jet stream. It's all messed up because the shortwave in the subtropical jet stream is interacting with the shortwave in the polar jet stream way too early, causing this to go into a negative tilt, enhancing this, driving it towards the Great Lakes. Now, if you get a scenario like what this is trying to show here, where you get this stretching in the atmosphere, if you get one of these polar shortwaves to interact with these subtropical shortwaves at just the right time, and it locks into cold air just at the right time, like that, which enhances, actually, this is trying to produce a warm seclusion type low, which almost like is a hybrid low. If everything comes together just right, and you cause an inverted trough, and you get the cold air locked in, then for a short window, for about 6 hours, you could theoretically produce a significant snowfall for the coastal plain and for the interior. And then at 162 hours, this solution would be possible. But notice what I just did here. I just had to have every piece of the weather pattern come together just right. So my answer to those asking whether or not I believe in whether or not the model guidance is accurate in producing these winter storms, if you have a scenario where everything comes together just right perfectly, then yeah, this could happen. And the reason why it could happen is because we have a negative NAO right now. A bit more east-based than I would like, but still it's there. So that's why the potential is there. But it's also why there's a lot of fool's gold. Because if one little feature is off in this forecast, then the whole forecast collapses. And instead of an inverted trough, you end up with just a few snow showers. Kind of like what we're looking at for this weekend. Remember, Saturday into Sunday, a couple of mile runs ago, suggested, in fact, I wonder if I could pull it up. Let's see, I'll go back to the 19th. Let's see, it's Thursday. It's one of these solutions here for Saturday. Here we are. This one right here, where it produced accumulating snowfall, about 2-3 inches. Why was this showing up for Saturday into Sunday? Because it was featuring the short waves interacting just right to produce an inverted trough. In fact, it was showing that again. Let's see. Oh, there it is again. A little bit different, but same idea. Now that we're under 120 hours, this is what it's showing. A few passing snow showers. Why? The short waves just don't interact. Fool's gold. A lot of people got excited about a snow threat for this weekend. It's nothing. A lot of people getting excited about a snow threat for today. Most of it's rain. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is not to poo-poo a forecast or I actually got a email saying I was anti-snow. Guys, I got to tell you something, and you're not going to hear this much from many meteorologists, and some of you have heard this before. I want snow. It actually helps my business quite a bit. Brings a lot of people in, a lot more subscribers, so on and so forth. a lot more ad revenue. I would love a string of winter snowstorms, not to mention my winter forecast would be right. But this is the reality I'm looking at here. Now, when I see this radar, you can see that the warm air has won quite a bit, and it's driving as expected. Precipitation is changing from snow to rain over northern Connecticut, the central Hudson River Valley. I think there's going to be some locations around the Poconos and Catskills that picked up a nice 1 or 2 inches of snow out of this before the event gets away. What I am interested in is this feature right here for tomorrow. Now, when I look at the model guidance for this time period, and let me zoom in, find the right piece here. For tomorrow afternoon, now we got warm air coming in here. If I can zoom in. And then cold air transport. So right around here. Right in central southern New Jersey, southeastern Pennsylvania. Plenty of warm air pushing temperatures into the 70s. Yes, the 70s. And then we have that cold front coming through. And at that same time period, I have a nice jet streak also taking hold and moving through. So I'm a little bit concerned with this convection marching its way through the region for tomorrow. I could actually see some thunderstorms out of this. Now, the SPC really isn't showing much, but we've all seen that before, just 48 hours ago. And when I take a look at the mesoscale model guidance, it's somewhat picking up this threat, but not very well. So there is some indication of some showers moving through. But I would be very careful with that line. In fact, let me see the HRR guidance here. See, it's trying to show that as well, and then kind of loses it. So just be careful with this marching through tomorrow morning into tomorrow afternoon, producing some isolated strong thunderstorms. We'll go strong thunderstorms for now. We don't have data for severe thunderstorms. But that's something that I'm very careful, very wary of for right around this area right here. I wonder if I could draw that. Probably not. For central New Jersey, talking about Monmouth, Mercer. In fact, here, let me put a map. Options. Of course not. Why would that have that? There it is. Okay. So basically this area right here. I'll zoom in for you guys. So this area right here, I'd be very wary for some strong thunderstorms tomorrow afternoon as that cold front moves through, based on the way that we're seeing convection developing and the way that this line of showers is kind of holding up pretty nicely. We'll see how well it holds up while moving over the Appalachians, but given the low-level wind shear that is in place and the strong jet streak, and we have plenty of warm air surging northward with precipitable water values pushing around 1 inch, I'd keep an eye on that. So, I mean, that is the general idea with the weather pattern that I'm seeing. The overall theme is that the La Nina-like conditions are going to continue to linger on through at least the next 2 weeks and then likely go neutral. I do like the idea of March being cool and active. Okay? So, not many days where temperatures are going to be above normal, but I can see a lot of near to slightly below normal temperatures and a lot of active low pressure systems moving through the region. A lot of potential for rainfall. And yeah, for you guys in the Poconos and Catskills, definitely the potential for snowfall and ice. So now with that, I am going to take your questions, and it looks like we just had a couple. So here we go. We'll dive into some of these questions. Let's see, Steve. In your severe threat analysis, did you mean to say sink south as to the cold air instead of sick south? Yeah, that's what I get for rushing my typing. Yes, sink south. Yes, not sick south. Hey, that's awesome. You know what? This is I've been doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes, so this is probably why I'm just a little.
Yeah.
So
some news is coming, but
some news is coming, but hold off. We'll
not there yet.
we'll tell you about all the news, but there's a lot going on behind the scenes. If you get my point. But we'll get to that later, once it's official. Do you think that there will be an elevated risk of derechos later this spring? That's a great question. Usually when you get a neutral encinal event, you get a little bit stronger polar jet stream. The subtropical jet stream is more active. You get more short waves involved. I would look for more thunderstorms coming in from the Ohio River Valley. Normally when I'm looking for derechos, they're dropping in from the Great Lakes, like the eastern Great Lakes, and diving southward. I can't rule it out, but I would look for more of a straight line wind events and broken line segments from our severe weather rather than from derecho events. But I can't rule it out completely all spring, but it's not going to be something that's going to be like a repeated scenario. I took a look at the 250 millibar jet. Nice amplification phasing of the Pacific jet through East Asia across the Pacific into the U.S. Here, let's pull that up. So there's 250. I already have that already set up. So, I see what you're talking about. Yeah, this right here is usually bad news for winter weather lovers in the eastern United States, because this just marches right across, keeps this ridge rather progressive, and basically leads to a trough in the west and the support for a ridge to build over the southeast. Let's see here. I think the SPC came up with some stuff for winter style high shear low cape scenarios. Yeah, I mean, I know that they're working on some data, and I gotta be honest with you, the environment that we're dealing with here, and I know a lot of people are asking about, what's going on with these tornadoes, and why are we seeing this more? I think there are several parts to this factor. Okay, one, obviously, our ability to observe these scenarios has improved significantly. That isn't to say that there weren't tornadoes or tornado development beforehand, but let's be honest, let's be frank with what we're dealing with here. We can see them a lot better, and therefore we can warn them better. Sometimes that leads to false positives, okay? On the other hand, the fact that we're actually seeing observations at the surface, i.e. damage, tells us, yes, these tornadoes are real, and that the forecast for them is legitimate, and the warnings are legitimate. So the question then becomes, well, why are we seeing them more? Now, my theory, and I've shared this with you guys before, is that I think we're seeing an enhancement of the urban heat island effect around the I-95 corridor, especially around central and southern New Jersey. You take the I-95 corridor and all the enhancement we're seeing with all the buildings and whatnot, so there's your urban heat island effect, but also you take the topographical environment, okay? In Monmouth County itself, there's a nice little bowl shape area right around Freehold that allows for cooler air to pool. But then you have this warm layer, this warm gradient around the I-95 corridor just to the northwest of it. And I think, and let me pull up this radar and zoom in right here again. And I'll put in this overlay of major highways. Okay, perfect. All right, and let's see if I can zoom in just a little bit more. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. I think what's happening here is that in Monmouth County right here, you see this little bowl shape right here? You're getting enhancement from the I-95 corridor right here. everything getting built up in Monmouth County, Middlesex County, Mercer, down through Philadelphia. This whole area right here. You have more buildings, more people, so on and so forth. And that's been going on for the past 30 years, right? Or longer, right? Past 50 years, right? So you have that aspect. Then you have some of these features right here where you get some of these low-lying areas where some cooler air can pool. Not a lot. We're not talking about a 20-degree gradient, but 1 or 2 degree gradient. That's all you need when it comes to mesoscale meteorology, okay? So you're getting these little gradients showing up here, and then you're having thunderstorms come in, and with those little gradients, you're getting some low-level wind shear because of the way that the air masses are moving and interacting in the microscale and mesoscale. So you're having these little features come in with an enhanced thunderstorm, and then this is where we come in with global warming, okay? So we know that we have an enhancement of precipitable water values. Overall, we've seen an enhancement over the past couple of decades. You have that. You have the enhancement from the urban heat island effect, causing turning in the atmosphere. You have more moisture to work with, which leads to a faster updraft. And so as a result, you're getting a more favorable environment for very weak, short-lived tornadoes. Look, we're not talking about F3s and F5s here, okay? Although you can get that in the perfect scenario. Very, 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 very rare. We're talking about F0s and F1s. Quick spin up, tosses your car. That's about it. It does a little damage to your roof. It's very rare to get anything stronger than that, but as you know, we have seen it before. So I think that is what's happening. But there has to be some research. I've actually suggested some individuals I know are doing some independent research and working with some universities, and I think that we're going to see a lot of interesting data on this coming out over the next 5 to 10 years. And it's going to be very interesting to read and watch. Given this winter's track record, not holding my breath for any timing working out for us to get snow, I expect next real chance of snow to be December 2023. Yeah, I can understand that point of view. Which do you think is more likely, another tornado in the region or an actual winter storm? Honestly, I would say probably another tornado in the region. I'd say that you have a better shot for snowfall if you're in the Poconos and Catskills. Put it that way. Given how strong the subtropical jet has been in our La Nina, any concern that even if the sea surface temperatures would be ones for a weak to moderate El Nino, that the subtropical jet could act like it would be a strong El Nino? That's certainly something I'm going to be keeping an eye on. I'm going to be watching the sea surface temperature gradient in the Pacific. And let me pull up what I mean by that. Okay, so what I'm going to be watching for as our El Nino starts to get its act together over the next couple of months is what does the gradient look like in the northern Pacific and how does that interact? When I get a good idea of that, then I think given the lessons that we've learned this winter and have a better understanding of the influence from our volcano back in last January, I think then I'll be able to give you a more defined answer. I don't know whether it'll be right, but at least I'll have a better shot and better reasoning with that. I do think, though, it is a possibility. I cannot rule it out, given what I've seen so far. Anyone who thinks you hate snow missed last winter's live chat during the January blizzard. Yeah, I'm talking about it. What did I do? I went like over 24 hours, right?
It was an all-nighter.
Yeah.
We went and crashed.
Yeah, I crashed at 30 hours. I literally didn't move for like
bed at like 8 a.m.
8 a.m. I don't think I moved for the rest of the day. It's like if you did not get me, honestly, if you did not get me to bed, I probably would have fallen asleep in this chair.
Both of us were shocked.
Yeah. So many of the tornadoes have spawned just west of I-95 in PA and southern New Jersey. Yeah, exactly. So what happens here, let me go back here, is that you get that thermal gradient set up right here, right? Because of what I was describing. So you get the enhanced thermal gradient, you get the turning of the winds because of it, and then you get your enhancement of your thunderstorms right here. And that's typically what we've been seeing, is that these storms come into, but notice, every time they're coming into Bucks, Montgomery, Chester, Hunterdon, Somerset, Mercer, and New Jersey, when they get into these areas, notice how they start to spark up. And it's something that I want everyone to watch, and I'll be watching as we go through the spring and summer months, of how much do these thunderstorms intensify when they get into these counties, when they get into these areas. And I'll be keeping an eye on it, because if all other factors are mute and you have a favorable synoptic environment, whether or not we see those thunderstorms really blossom because of this effect. Very interesting stuff. The fact that this was an EF2 in February is legit insane. It makes you wonder, when you have summer severe parameters in place, what could come up with your theory. Yeah, it's something that is concerning. That is for sure. Yeah. Just take a drive up Garden State Parkway and see the variation in temperatures based on terrain. Absolutely. Absolutely. This winter has been so weird, it wouldn't surprise me one bit if we get a good-sized snowstorm in March and April. You know what? Opening day of baseball. Look, I can just see it. I'm ready for baseball, looking forward to it. Yankee fans getting excited, Met fans getting excited, Philly fans getting excited, even though their mascot is evil. And on that day, first day of baseball, 8 inches of snow. I can see it. I can totally see it. That's how crazy this pattern has been. I wouldn't forecast it. I wouldn't bet my life on it, but I could definitely see it happening. Let's see here. What's going on YouTube? Any chance of snow for next week in central New Jersey? Oh, I know who this is. Mm-hmm. Yeah. At this time, not much. But if you time it just right, on Saturday morning, you might see a flurry. So, you got that for you. Steve, with the tornado warning that happened yesterday, is that a sign of a season of severe weather of this summer? I wouldn't really, especially with mesoscale events, I would not take any theme out of for the season based on something that happens right now. A theme I would keep an eye on for the spring and the summer is the overall storm track. You really don't want to do individual storms, because each storm's mesoscale environment is unique, kind of like a snowflake, right? So you really don't want to make that type of determination. But what you can do is say, okay, in March and April, we start to establish a storm track. Let's say the storm track is to the north and west of the region, and these cold fronts are swinging through in the afternoon hours. And when they do, they produce a robust line of thunderstorms with more vertical wind shear because of the location of the 850 millibar jet. If you see that several times, that's a theme. But an individual thunderstorm, you really can't take any theme out of that, because each individual thunderstorm has its own unique set of influences. Eagles and Phillies both lost in the finals. How great is that? Well, what can I say? Hey, look, you know what I say to Eagles and Phillies fans? You made it. None of my teams did. Well, my Chiefs did. You know, I'm not going to rub that in. But, what I would say to Eagle fans and to Phillies fans is that there are a whole bunch of fan bases that wish they were where you were. So I would say kudos to them and best of luck to the next season. Any thoughts on how all the chemicals being released from the derailment might have some effect on the microclimate? That's actually a really good question. And from what I've been seeing with the analysis on particles from various NOAA models, is a lot of those particles and a lot of the chemicals involved. I'm going to zoom out here. So you know what? I'll use a satellite picture. A lot of those chemicals got driven up towards, let's say, Erie and towards the eastern Great Lakes and kind of run into an embankment with the Appalachian Mountains. Because of the fumes staying at a certain level, they really kind of have not been at least much of an increase in terms of the air content for the northern Mid-Atlantic. The Appalachians have so far protected us quite a bit based on the latest data. I don't expect there to be a lingering influence for us. Those around the Ohio River Valley, that's a totally different story. It's not pretty, and I wouldn't want to be around anywhere near that town. Is there a relationship between snowless winters and the upcoming hurricane season? Not really. The reason why I don't put a lot of weight into that is because usually connections between snow seasons and tropical seasons are based on the same tropical forcing influences. And really what you want to do is go tropical environment to snow environment, to winter environment. Because usually the environment that's in place for the tropics is the same for the winter. But you don't usually see the same environment for the winter in place for the tropics, right? So in this case, you're having a La Nina, and by the time we get to the summer and the heart of the tropical season, especially late summer, you are likely to see an El Nino. Two different types of tropical forcing parameters which really don't have any interaction between each other. Or there really isn't a relationship that you can really garner with that. One thing of note is the coldest air by far at this point at both 850 and 700 is over northern Quebec, Hudson Bay, and that area. Yeah, that's kind of a problem for snow lovers here, because if the coldest air is found over northern Quebec, when that air gets transported, you're not seeing cold air masses being transported from due north or northeast. They're coming from the west and northwest. Well, the air mass source to the west and northwest of us is moderating rapidly. So what you want is the coldest air to be found around the Hudson Bay and the western shores of the Hudson Bay, and then that would get transported into our area. Being over Quebec, well, here, let's actually go there. Let's illustrate, shall we? So we'll pull this up. Temperatures, 850. Okay, so there's our cold pool right there. Notice how the winds are moving here, okay? They're going in this direction. Okay, I'll zoom in. So we can zoom in here. So in this environment, all your coldest air is getting transported towards the Canadian Maritimes. What you want is for this wind flow to go due south. But that's not happening in this case. What you have is that your coldest air is being transported away behind, and what you really want is for this feature to be here. Because then at the very least it would come in behind this storm, and then you get the cold air to come in. In this case, what you have is that your coldest air is being transported over the Atlantic and moderated rapidly. So your core is being wasted. Just looking at the radar, look at the light green spot popping up just west of the Philadelphia area. Yep, this is just a few scattered showers. You could see an isolated pop-up thunderstorm. Here, let me take off some of these overlays here. You can see some of that popping up here. Nothing really impressive. This, though, has my eye. You know, I'm wondering. Let me pull up something here. See that? We're starting to see some shears starting to show up here. Not much in the way of instability. We have some moderate instability. That's not too bad. See some fernogenesis. Okay, so what I'm seeing here, based on some of these observations, I definitely have some of that wind shear I'm going to be keeping an eye on, which is right about here. And we do have some mid-level instability. So if that continues to be the case as we move on into late tomorrow morning into the early afternoon hours, we may be dealing with a few thunderstorms moving through. And that's all I could really say beyond that point. But certainly some interesting data to keep an eye on. Interesting that the shear is focused over the terrain. I think that's just happenstance. I really can't take much beyond that. Has this winter's pattern caused more temperature inversions than usual? I've noticed many nights this season where lows where I am 400 foot elevation or 4 or 5 degrees above what Philly is recording. Before this winter, we averaged 2 to 3 degrees cooler. I do think we've seen some rather unique inversions this winter, and I think a lot of that has to do with the nature of the Pacific air masses that we've been dealing with. I don't know whether that's going to be a prevailing theme heading into the spring, but I definitely noticed that more, and that is a hallmark of a moderating Pacific polar air mass. And that's what we've been seeing quite a bit so far this winter. Because our air masses are generally coming in from the west coast, coming over the Rockies, which moderates them, and then some touch of polar air masses mixing in as storms just miss us. Let's take a look at some YouTube questions. Let's see here. Do you think we see a lot of tornadoes? Oh, I know who this is. Okay. Or severe thunderstorms. I don't know, define a lot. What's a lot? I think that we will have an active season. I don't know whether they'll all be severe. I doubt it. But I think I'm going to be busy. I'll put it that way. I think the SPC is going to be busy. And that's even more to the point. And, wow, we've had some great questions. So I think that I also want to touch on some snow maps here, because this is some interesting stuff just to keep note of. Now, when I look at this and I study this, you might ask, hey, Steve, what do you do with something like this? Or let's say this is the European guidance and total snowfall, right? Well, the first question I would ask when I'm working with a snow map, and I kind of want to touch on this because I know I see a lot of people using this, and it's really important to cover this, especially as we move into March. What a snow map is in model guidance, typically, is simply take your QPF, take your 850 millibar temperatures. If 850 millibar temperatures are below freezing, multiply by 10. That's essentially what it is. Now, some snow maps take into account the potential for sleet. Some snow maps take into account the snow ratio. So sometimes they'll multiply that by 20. Sometimes it multiplies it by 4, depending on the environment. But I want to show you this because, and you can also use the ensemble guidance. The reason why you don't want to use snow maps in your forecast and when you're doing a forecast is that it leaves out a lot of really important information, like when is the storm happening and what is the sun angle if you're dealing with a snowfall in November or March. That's an important question. Because if it's happening during the day, you could probably cut that snowfall map in half as far as what's being put out. Another question you have to ask, is this an environment where you're getting strong warm air transport or strong cold air transport? Is this part of a nor'easter or is this part of a warm front that's lifting northward? And how much precipitation rate change is there? So what I always say, and what I train a lot of my interns on, is take these maps and burn them. They make a forecaster worse. You can use it for illustration purposes, and a great time to use this is when you know you have an all snow event and you kind of want to illustrate or highlight where you think you can see some mesoscale banding or what the potential of that mesoscale banding is. But to use this data as a go-to forecast point or to post this data on social media is a huge error, because what you're missing with this data are all the little details that as a forecaster you should really focus on using and considering. So I guess what I would say is that over the next 10, 15 days, I guarantee you're going to see a lot of these maps floating around, especially when they're 7 to 10 days out. Just understand that what you're seeing is maybe a tenth of the story, especially this time of year. And when looking at something like this, never take it verbatim. I wouldn't even get excited about it. I would just throw it out. And the way to forecast for snow is that you get your QPF amounts and then you analyze the environment that you're forecasting for and the temperatures at each level. And that takes time. That takes times hours. Right, honey? How many times have I been sitting here for like hours trying to figure this, right? And it takes a lot of hard work. A lot more than just posting that. So I wanted to share that because I'm seeing that a lot in social media. Been seeing that for years. And in my opinion, it's just really misleading stuff. So I figure I kind of touch on that because I know I'm going to see it a lot as we go forward. And I would not be surprised if we see it for a lot being shown quite a bit in for the forecasting for this weekend and for next week. And it's a nice tool to use if you are in an environment where you have 850 millibar temperatures somewhere between -4 and -8 degrees Celsius, and you don't have any type of warm air transport driving in at 925 millibars, and you have plenty of QPF, and there's a pretty good source of moisture. You got all those features combined, then you can use that. So if I was going to use this, I would use it only for this area right here. And then the rest of this, well, that's where the hard work comes in. So let's see if we have any more questions before we wrap things up for tonight. Let's see, check out YouTube. Everything's caught up there. Okay, so with that said, we'll wrap this up. So for tomorrow, we'll be keeping an eye on this line of showers and thunderstorms that are going to be marching their way through. Again, I'm not expecting anything severe, but just keep an eye to the sky and an ear to your weather radio as that moves through. Our weather pattern is going to remain active, and with active, we're also going to see a lot of volatile weather temperature forecasts. One thing I forgot to mention, temperature forecasts are absolutely insane. Every model runs a different type of solution. I mean, I've seen temperatures swing a good 40 degrees from day to day. So expect that volatility to remain in place through early March, which is going to drive me absolutely insane.
You and me both. Oh, God.
From a variety, from forecasting, sinuses, headaches, it's not going to be pretty. One day will be in the 70s, next day will be in the 30s. How you dress for that, I don't know. Our pattern's going to remain very active, but be wary of these details. Be wary of inverted troughs. That's what this is, okay? When you start to see this type of signal, because this could easily just end up being a few snow showers, and that's about it. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. And as always, don't be surprised if your forecast 7 to 10 days out of a major winter storm ends up being nothing more than a few snow showers and rain showers. But we'll keep an eye on things. That's it for tonight, I think. Thank you again, as always, for joining and for following along with our weekly live chat. If you have any questions, please drop me an email, and we'll include them in next week's live chat as we continue on to search for the elusive inch of snow. Have a great night, and as always, stay safe out there.